I want to Hello. Hi, I'm so pleased to welcome you today. It's a really nice audience, and there's a lot of people here who I haven't seen before at the Institute, so welcome. You're obviously at the Aga Khan University, the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations, for those of you who haven't been here before, but we're very happy to have you. I'm delighted to introduce today our speaker, who I met in September for the first time after some lengthy correspondence. Can you hear me in the back? Just a second. Yeah, just about, okay. I'll try and speak up. So Ofir Haim is a PhD candidate at the Mandel School for Advanced Studies in the Humanities at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And he and I met through the agency of a former graduate student friend of mine, Raquel Kelly's, who's the head of the, I guess, Middle East collection, Arabic collection in the National Library. And I was told at the time, maybe a year or so ago, that Ofir and a group of people in Israel were doing really exciting and interesting work on a set of documents that had been purchased from Afghanistan. So this is the follow-on to that first conversation. And I was delighted to go and meet with Ofir in Jerusalem in September and to really sit and look at the collection with him on the Persian materials. So his research interests, though, are actually much wider even than the materials you'll hear about today, and extend to culture and language of Iranian Jewry in general, particularly during the pre-Mongol period. His dissertation, which he's now completing, I hope I can say, well, mostly completing, that's, I guess, the nature of it, focuses on an early Bible exegesis in Judeo-Persian from the 11th and 12th centuries, and is under the supervision of Shaul Shaket and Julia Rubanovich. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more, but I hope you'll enjoy as much as I have learning about the documents and the work that he's been doing at the library. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations of Aga Khan University, and especially to Dr. Sarah Savant for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be here. Okay. The National Library of Israel holds around 220 textual items of what appears to be a much larger corpus that emanates from Afghanistan. Okay, thanks. Now, the first 29 documents in this collection were purchased in 2013. And in 2016, the National Library acquired nearly 200 additional items. And this purchase enriched the collection and made it a potential source for research in many fields of study, as we will see. Now, this collection of the National Library is very diverse in content, and it contains texts from various genres. We have legal and administrative documents, we have letters, we have poetry, Bible exegesis, we have medicine texts, and many more. And these texts are also written in 6 different languages. We have Judeo-Persian, which is Persian in Hebrew script, and especially from the Pre-Mongol era. We have Persian in the Arabic script, Judeo-Arabic, Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic. And this collection can be roughly divided into two groups. And these groups differ in many respects and do not seem to come from the same source. Group 1 is datable to the first half of the 11th century. Significant portions of the items in this group are written in Hebrew script, mostly in early Judeo-Persian, but we also have Hebrew and Aramaic and Judeo-Arabic. And the majority of the texts in this group are letters, legal documents, and incomplete ledgers. There are some liturgical texts and exegetical texts and some poems too. We will see some of them. And these texts belong to the archive of a Jewish family that lived in Bāmiyān during the first half of the 11th century. Now, the second group consists of letters and various documents that are dated to the second half of the 12th century and the early 13th century, in the years that preceded the Mongol invasion. Most of the texts are written in New Persian, in Arabic script, and a few of them in Arabic. And unlike the first group, this group does not seem to contain any text in Hebrew script. These are the main groups of this collection. Now, it has not been verified how these two groups are connected to each other, if at all. In any case, it is a welcome addition that we have a new textual source from the area of Bāmiyān that is datable to a period of 200 years. And as we will see, it's quite a unique source for the history of the Bāmiyān Valley during the Pre-Mongol era, and in particular that of the Jewish communities in eastern Iran. Now, so what I intend to do here today is give you a short overview of the different materials in the collection, present their general features, and the preliminary conclusions of my works and the works of my colleagues on these documents, particularly on Group 1, which my colleagues and I have been studying under the guidance of Professor Zhou and Professor Ludwig Paul for several years now. Now, as I said before, the Group 1, or at least the documentary materials, that is the letters and the legal documents and the ledgers, belong to an archive of a Jewish family that lived in Bāmiyān during the first half of the 11th century. Now, due to the nature of due to the Jewish nature of many of these documents, as I said, most of them are written in Hebrew script, the entire collection was titled the Afghan Geniza, or Geniza. But it is not certain that they do come from a Geniza. Now, just to make sure we're on the same page, what is a Geniza? It's a storage area in a Jewish synagogue or a cemetery that is designated for the temporary storage of Hebrew language books and papers on religious topics and those that contain the name of God before they are brought to burial in a cemetery. So, for example, examples of genizas we have on the left. We have a geniza at a cemetery in Kolkata, India, and on the right we have a modern geniza receptacle in Tel Aviv, in the street. And afterwards they are brought to burial. That's a practice that has been going on for hundreds of years. Now, in general, our knowledge of the Jews of Eastern Iran in this period, that is the Pre-Mongol period, derives mainly from various historical and literary sources. For example, we find in geographical and historical compositions reports that there is a Jewish community in a certain town or in a region, or just sayings like there are many Jews in Khorasan, the area of Eastern Iran, so to say. And occasionally there are letters in Judeo-Arabic from the famous Cairo Geniza that says that there's a Jew who comes from Samarkand or a Khorasani merchant and so on. So we know that there were Jews in these areas. And in addition to these textual pieces of evidence, we also have several archaeological findings from this area that were discovered during the 20th century. I will mention four. The first one is the Tangi Azau inscription that was found west of Herat, and it is probably the earliest station of early Judeo-Persian. It is dated to the second half of the 8th century. We have also tombstones from Firuzku, the main capital of the Ghurid dynasty. It seems that these tombstones were made only for the notables of the community, not for everyone. And they are written in a mixture of Judeo-Persian and Hebrew. We have a Torah pointer also from the area of Ur, probably, and a Jewish Aramaic amulet that was reportedly from Bāmiyān. So, just for you to see, this is the Tangi Azau inscription. We have three different descriptions of three people who passed by the area and wrote their name on the rock. And we have this is one of the tombstones from Firuzku of a person named David Neb Abul Hassan from the year 1158. So we have several dozens of these tombstones. Now, in this state of affairs, the only sources for the history of the Jewish communities of Eastern Iran are a few archaeological findings and second-hand reports of the existence of these communities. And this situation has changed several years ago when the discussed texts were discovered. And these are not texts that only mention the Jews of Eastern Iran, but they were written by them. And from these documents, we can learn much about these Jewish communities and about this family in particular. So, what can we learn from these documents of Group 1? First of all, we can construct a family tree. So, the prominent names in the corpus are those. Unfortunately, we don't see them quite well. We have Abu Nasser Yehuda and his son Abu Hassan Siman Tov. Siman Tov is a Hebrew name, literally meaning a good sign, a good omen. Most of the letters were addressed to these two, to the father and son. And the name Abu Nasser ibn Daniel is also mentioned in the legal documents, in most of the legal documents in the archive. And this documentary material of Group 1 does not attest only to Jewish presence in Bāmiyān, but also in other cities in the area. Abu Nasser and his son probably had ties with other family members or business associates, Jewish business associates from other locations. One of the best preserved letters in the collection of the National Library of Israel, written in early Judeo-Persian, was sent to Abu Hassan Siman Tov, who was in Bāmiyān, from a person called Yair ben Emed from Ghazneh. So Yair writes at length about his personal issues and mainly justifies his remaining in Ghazneh and explains why he won't be able to make it to Bāmiyān. And but he expresses his desire to go there one day. And in order to justify his remaining in Ghazneh, he writes, for example, that he is not accustomed to traveling and being remote from home, and he cannot leave his shop because if he leaves it, he will be he will become poor. So he was not exactly a long-distance merchant, as you can see. Now, the various letters written in Judeo-Persian and other documents as well also suggest that Abu Nasser and his son were quite powerful figures within the Jewish population of the region. For example, we have letters where the writer requests financial aid from Abu Nasser or his son, or he requests their help in solving a certain conflict or a problem. So in the same letter, for example, we see that Yair asks Abu Hassan to intervene in the matter of a person called Abraham ben Ali, who was probably sentenced and excommunicated, so he should intervene for his favor in order to solve this problem. Now, from the nature of and the content of this text, we may also infer that Abu Nasr and his son were modest landowners and probably small-scale merchants. They practiced trade in their area. How do we know that they were landowners? We have, for example, an acknowledgement deeds and legal documents concerning land. So this acknowledgement deed concerned the lease of 3 parcels of land that are owned by Abu Nasr. Yes, they have the names here, Fular, Suirak, and Ba'arak, and in this specific document, a person called Hossein ibn Hassan asks Abu Nasr to lease these plots of land for 3 years in exchange for agricultural produce. And these parcels of land also appear in other documents as well. For example, we have a ledger, apparently that belongs to Abu Nasr, and in this page that we see here, we see the income of various parcels of land. And these parcels of land include the 3 that we see here. So he might have owned them for a long period of time. Now, we have these ledgers that I mentioned. We see one page. And their owner, probably Abu Nasr, recorded various transactions in these ledgers. And we can learn much about his activity as a merchant and as a landowner. Now, the page given in this slide concerns the revenue from his property. See, you have the name of the parcel of land. On the other side, you have the amount of grain that you received from that plot of land. But most of the pages in these ledgers concern debts owed to him by other people. The reason for the debt is not mentioned in most cases. But it is most likely that at least some of them, some of these debts were owed by people who leased lands from Abu Nasr. Here we see several debts, starting with the word abar, in early Judeo-Persian abar, and Standard New Persian bar, literally on, but also to owe someone, like Arabic ala. And for example, we have a person named Hossein, son of Hassan, from a village named Paliz or Palij, that owes a certain amount of grain, and so on. We have many records such as this. Now, these ledgers and the legal documents contain many toponyms, many place names, as you see, for example. We have the name Palij, and most of which were apparently in the area of Bāmiyān. And a significant portion were not successfully identified with present-day localities. So it is quite reasonable to assume that some of them were abandoned at a certain point during the course of history. And the study of these toponyms require further work. And its conclusions might contribute to the field of historical geography of Afghanistan, and the Bāmiyān Valley in particular. So we know that they were landowners. How do we know that they are merchants? So the various documents also support the conjecture that Abu Nasr and his son practiced trade. We have no evidence of long-distance trade or connection outside the rural area of Bāmiyān and neighboring cities, such as Ghazne. Some of the letters are of a commercial nature. They deal with buying and selling and the loss of various goods, or with some payments. And for example, such as this letter that was sent to Abu Nasr from a person named Al-Hussein ibn Ali. You can see some of his name here. And the name of the recipient in the early New Persian letter is usually not mentioned. He is usually referred to as the Khwaja Fazel, the eminent master, or titles such as this. And because of this, we don't have the name of the recipient, so it's not always easy to decide whether a certain letter belongs to the archive of the Jewish family or not. We have this problem. But this letter that concerns various payments and the transfer of commodities was probably part of the archive, because on the back side we have notes, commercial notes in Judeo-Persian. So you know that probably the recipient was Jewish. And when the letter was no longer of use to him, to the recipient, he used the back side for different purposes. Let's see another example of this secondary use of material. This is a panegyric poem that was written to the son, Bul Hassan. And you see that the panegyric poem starts here, but we have a dedication written in Arabic. The poem itself is in New Persian. So you see that this is the transcription and translation of this dedication. So from this fact, we can also assume that they had a high social status too. Not everyone is given a panegyric poem such as this. On the back side of the first folio of this poem, we see various commercial notes written on it. So again, this is an example of secondary use of these papers. Now, okay, so they were landowners, they were merchants. Who were their business associates? Whom did they deal with? Well, we have many names attested in the corpus, especially in the ledgers. And most of these names are of Arabic origin, whether scriptural or not. And this may suggest that a significant part of the population of the Bāmiyān Valley in the 11th century was Muslim. But it is possible that the names of Jews, or maybe Christians, were sometimes written in their Arabic form. Now, other names that are attested are of Hebrew origin, and some of them are of Persian origin. We have names like Ardashir, we have Shohak, and so on. There are also other names that their origin is not clear to me at this stage. So it is possible that some of them originate in Eastern Iranian languages, perhaps Bactrian. It still has to be worked on. If we study these names properly and do a study of these names, we might learn more about the different groups that lived in the Bāmiyān Valley and maybe the Islamization process of this area. Now, but it would be reasonable to assume for now that most of the people with whom Abu Nasr and his son dealt were Muslim. And it is very likely that they had a long and personal acquaintance with some of the individuals that are mentioned in the corpus. Why is that? One reason is that we have recurring names. Just like we had the names of the plots of land that appear in different documents, we also have names of people that are mentioned in various documents. For example, this person here, both San, Lamorad, or Lamodag, I'm not sure about the reading of the last name. He appears in a legal document and in the ledgers. And this may imply that their relationship between him and Abu Nasr was continuous. Another reason to assume this long acquaintance between Abu Nasr and his business associates was that he identifies some individuals by hypocoristic names. For example, this is a legal document, again an acknowledgement deed. Most of the legal documents are acknowledgement deeds in this corpus. And it concerns a debt of 15 bowls of wheat. The debtor is called Mansur Bnei Abil Abbas. His name is here. But on the back side, we have a short note that's written in Hebrew script that summarizes the details of the legal transaction. This is in Judeo-Persian. It's written in Judeo-Persian in Hebrew script. And here, the debtor is named Masura. So we have Masur, the Judeo-Persian variant of Mansur, and plus the diminutive suffix ak, which could be understood as a hypocoristic name. Now, in general, most of the legal documents are acknowledgement of debt. I said that, and the practice of adding these short notes to the document on the backside was probably done in order to enable easier identification by the owner of the document. These documents were folded into very narrow rectangles and were stored And each time the owner wanted to read a certain document, he pulled it out and saw the summarizing note that he wrote before. Now, the existence of Islamic legal documents in the archive of a Jewish family also suggests that the Jewish inhabitants of the region made use of Islamic legal devices for conducting commercial and financial transactions. Goitain, the great scholar of the Cairo Geniza, already noticed the large number of Arabic legal documents in the Cairo Geniza, and most of them were published by Professor Jeffrey Kahn. And from their existence, he concluded that it was not unusual for Jews in the Islamic world to use Muslim judiciary for litigation and for concluding contracts, and they were able to use these documents. And he was probably right, because we see an example not only of in Cairo, but also in the area of present-day Afghanistan of this phenomenon. So far we have discussed the documentary material from the archive of the Jewish family. But there are also fragments of religious literature that is written in Hebrew and Aramaic. We have a bifolio of a Jewish prayer book. We have a bifolio of Mishnah. We have several Hebrew piyutim. Piyutim are liturgical poems written in Hebrew. And at least some of the non-documentary texts were owned by this family. Again, we can't know for sure that all the literary material was owned by this family, but at least some of them. For example, we have this piyut, where the name of Abraham Bar Daniel is written on the side. I hope it was not a late addition by someone. This name also occurs in the earliest legal document in this corpus, from the year 1005. See, the name Ibrahim ben Daniel is the person that the person here, Abul Umayr ben Ahmad, owes money to. So, and this Ibrahim, son of Daniel, is probably the brother of Abu Nasr ben Daniel. Now, in addition, the collection also contains fragments of unknown works, and particularly fragments of Bible translations and commentaries that were written in Judeo-Persian. We have very few exegetical works written in Judeo-Persian from the Pre-Mongol period, especially when you compare it to the number of extant Judeo-Arabic manuscripts. We have many, we have thousands. And these fragments are a welcome addition to this small but important group of texts. And hopefully it would lead us to the understanding of the intellectual activity of Iranian Jewry at that time. So let's see two examples. This one is a folio that discusses Deuteronomy chapter 22. On the upper right corner, we see the Hebrew letter Tet, which is equivalent to the number 9. And this denotes that it is the beginning of the 9th quire of a manuscript. So it means that this folio was part of a longer work, and possibly a commentary on Deuteronomy or the entire Pentateuch. We don't know yet. Maybe other documents will come up from this manuscript. And another example is a fragment from a commentary on Leviticus chapter 11. And what's special about this fragment is that it is made of parchment, unlike the rest of the text that are written on paper. So, as shown here, the first group, Group 1, consists of several dozens of documents, and it is an invaluable source that provides us a glimpse into the life of a Jewish family in the Bāmiyān Valley that lived during the 11th century. And it could shed light on Jewish communities in eastern Iran from various aspects, from everyday life to religious thought. Now, in the time that remains, I will speak about the other group of materials, that is Group 2, which I presented at the beginning, and some of its peculiarities. Now, Group 2 consists of around 150 leaves, mainly legal documents and text receipts and letters. And they are datable to the second half of the 12th century and early 13th century. These documents are written mainly in New Persian, but there are a few written in Arabic. So far, these documents have not been thoroughly studied, or at least not as Group 1. I have been involved in the process of classifying and cataloging them, and I will share with you my first impressions of this material. And while working on them, it occurred to me that it is not an easy task to read them. They are written in cursive script with almost no diacritical dots, and the use of abbreviations for numbers, for commodities, weights, and measures is quite common, and it makes it even more difficult to read them. So these documents apparently also originate from the area of Bāmiyān, or at least some of them. This place name, Bāmiyān, is attested in several of these documents. For example, we have this acknowledgement deed from the year 1181, and a person named Muhammad bin Ahmad from the great village of Kavshan, the Buzurg Kavshan, acknowledges a debt of 630 man of grain. Man is a weight unit. And he promises to repay the debt in Bāmiyān within 20 days. He specifically states that in the document that he will pay the debt in Bāmiyān within 20 days. Now, the village of Kavshan could be identified with the Kavshan Valley that resides 140 kilometers northeast of Bāmiyān. Could be. And the fact that this individual must travel to Bāmiyān to pay the debt could indicate his dependence on this urban center. Now, the area of Bāmiyān itself went quite significant changes during the 12th and 13th centuries, the period in which these documents were written. In the year 1155, the Shansabani dynasty, the Ghuri dynasty, conquered this region from the Ghaznavid, the previous dynasty, and made it one of their political centers, together with Firuzku and together with Ghazni. There were three political centers to this dynasty. And the Ghuri branch of Bāmiyān ruled over massive territories north of the city, including sometimes beyond the Oxus River. And in the beginning of the 13th century, the city was conquered by another dynasty, the Khwarazm Shahs. But a few years later, in the year 1221, it was destroyed by the Mongols. Now, the textual sources for the study of pre-Mongol Bāmiyān are very few, referring to Bāmiyān during the 12th and 13th century. We have our knowledge of Bāmiyān under the Rurids come from the work Tabarad-e-Naseri, which was written by Minhaj-e-Din ibn Siraj-e-Din Juzjani, or shortly Minhaj-e-Siraj. And he spent most of his, many years of his life under the Ghuri dynasty. And a significant portion of his work is dedicated to the three branches of the Ghuri dynasty, in Firuzku, in Bāmiyān, and in Ghazni. The second part, another part of his work is dedicated to the Delhi Sultanate, to which he fled from the Mongols and spent the rest of his life. So we have here the edition by Abdelhai Habibi and the translation by Rarity of this work. Now, this historical source is also accompanied by a few documents, 8 documents from the year 1211 that were found in Bāmiyān. They were probably brought to France by the DAFA, by the French expedition, archaeological French expedition to Afghanistan, but they were given back to Afghan authorities at some point. Photographs of these documents were brought to the scholar Vladimir Minovsky, who published them, and he gave a full edition of one of the letters, and this shortly described the other 7. And Minovsky, in the article that you see here, he emphasizes the importance of these documents as a source for the end of the Ghuri dynasty and the beginning of the Khwarazm Shah dynasty. It is possible that these documents are somehow related to the documents that are now in the National Library, though it still has to be verified. Now, considering all this, we have very few textual sources, and considering the large number of the documents in the National Library, Group 2 may be a unique source for the history of Ghurid rule and Khwarazm-Shahi rule and their administration, and as well for everyday life in the Bāmiyān Valley at that period. Now, one interesting feature of these documents is that some of them were written on the back of disused documents. We saw this happening in Group 1, but we have it here even more in Group 2. We have several instances where old letters and documents were cut into pieces of various sizes so that their back could be reused again. So we have this acknowledgement deed from the beginning of the year 1181, and it concerns a debt of 150 man of wheat that is owed by a person called Ali ibn Ibrahim. But the back of this document is actually a fragment of another document, and the format suggests that it's some kind of official document. You have this wide line spacing and a narrow rectangle, which might suggest that it's. Now, the year which appears here seems to be 75, that is 575 Hijri, which is equivalent to 1180 CE. So that's a bit more than a year before drawing up the acknowledgement deed. And now it is hoped that in the future we'll be able to reunite more of these fragments and therefore increase the number of documents under investigation. We get 2 for 1, more or less. Now, this is reminiscent of what we see, for example, in the Cairo Geniza. Many recycled decrees have survived in the Geniza, almost all of them as fragments. These decrees were issued in the Fatimid court in Cairo, and at some point found their way to the open market, where they were sold. These documents are currently studied by Marina Ustov from Princeton University. So, in the example here, we see fragments of a Jewish halachic work. Now it's difficult to see, but you can see all these fragments that add up to one work. And on the other side, you see the back of a Fatimid decree. And again, you see the wide line spacing between of this document. This text was discussed in a short article by 3 Geniza scholars, Shveka, Ostov, and Schlanger. You can find it even online. Now, in other cases, leaves from literary works were taken and reused for different purposes. Not only decrees were handled that way, but also literary material. For example, we have this fragment of some astrological treatise dealing with the zodiac sign and star of different cities. And the other side contains an account of 8,255 man. All these numbers add up to this one. You can check me later. And the lower half is called Daftare Baratha. Now, and then it is followed by a list of various barats. Now, the term barat is used to denote quittances, probably of tax payments. It comes from the Arabic word bara. So in general, around 20% of Group 2 are barat-type documents. Most of these barats were issued by a person named Abu Bakr ibn Omar. You see his name here. He wrote it down on the top of the document. And it is dated to the second half of the 12th century. Each barat was issued to a different person or group of persons. So the fact that we have so many barats mentioning different individuals, but were written by the same scribe, could indicate that they were probably the copies that were preserved in the issuing institute, probably some divan or a royal granary, and they were not the ones that were given to the payers. If we had those that were given to the payers, we have the same name recurring here, the one who paid the tax, not the one who wrote it. So, this barat, for example, concerns the delivery of a certain quantity of wheat, which is written here. Above, you see the word gandom, which is wheat in Persian, and below the number, probably Shastu Sheshman, 66 man. And the appearance of the term here, ambare chase, which is could be translated the private granary or the royal granary, could indicate that it was delivered to the granary that was owned by the ruler. In general, the term chase was used to denote property belonging to the ruler of his family. Now, I said before that we have many abbreviations in these documents, and these abbreviations occur particularly in these barats. So, in the following slide, we have, for example, some sort of siyaq or siyaqat in Persian. It is a specialized writing system, siyaq, which is based upon the numbers in Arabic, and it was used for accounting or administration. So on the left side of the document, again, we see the type of commodity, gandom, wheat, and the number and the amount, the vistuchel man, 240 man. And on the right side, we have the abbreviated form of half of the sum. You have mim aleph for mia, for 100, ainun for ishrin, and mar. So you have the half of the sum. And these abbreviations are something that you have to, one must deal with when he approaches these documents. Now, and generally speaking, many documents concern the delivery and payment of grain. So we have this letter, for example, written for a person named Mu'tamad al-Dawli Abu Bakr. He also is a recurring figure in these documents. And the sender requests Abu Bakr's permission to use his mill to make flour, asya. So this is just one example of the type of material that we have. Now, we mentioned the person named Abu Bakr ibn Omar and Mu'tamad al-Dawli Abu Bakr could be the same person, still has to be verified. These names occur in many documents, but we also have other names that occur in these documents. For example, we have two other individuals that their names are attested in documents that are dated to the few years before the Mongol invasion. So we have Jamal ad-Din, Muhammad ibn Mahmud, and Shuja ibn Muhammad Hassan. On the left, we see, for example, a declaration made by both that concerns the delivery of 90 kharvars of wheat. Kharvar, again, is a unit, much larger than man. This document is dated to the year 1217, 3 or 4 years before the Mongol invasion. And on the right here, you can see their names appearing again in a text witness from the year 1218, a year later. So what can we do? What can you understand from all of this? We see that these documents are dated to a period of several decades and do not pertain to one individual or group, not like group 1, which refers to the same family. And therefore, it seems that group 2 is not a single and unified archive or corpus. It contains several smaller groups, and they record the activities of different individuals probably in the Bāmiyān Valley in the decades preceding the Mongol invasion. And future research of these documents might better clarify this issue. Now, in addition to these groups, we also have literary material in Arabic and in Persian, not only Jewish material, Jewish literary material. And it is usually very fragmentary and sometimes only partly legible. For example, we have this very nice fragment, and after straining your eyes for quite some time, it decides to reveal itself to you. And it turns out that it's a commentary on several verses from an Arabic Qasida by the 8th century poet Zhou. In other instances, the text is quite legible, but I was unable to identify it. It is possible that some of these fragments are the remnants of either two unknown works that were composed in Eastern Iran in the 1st century of Islam. Another possibility is that these are fragments of work that are known to us only by title. We still have to verify this. The following slide presents a bifolio from possibly some historical treatise that's written in Arabic. It describes events related to a certain Al-Hussein bin Ali. Now, he is probably Al-Hussein bin Ali al-Marwazi or Marwarudi, was active in Samanid territories. He was a Samanid military commander, and he was active during the early 10th century. So, to conclude, the collection that I discussed here with you today consists of 250 leaves that is written in 6 different languages. It is divided into 2 different groups of texts. One is from the archive of a Jewish family that lived in Bāmiyān during the 11th century. The other consists of many documents, possibly from different sources, and it is datable to the second half of the 12th and early 13th centuries. The range in language and in genre may be very important for many fields of studies. We can learn much about Islamic legal history and the development of Islamic legal law in Iranian territories. It can contribute much to Iranian linguistics and the development of New Persian. We could extract much information about the history of the Bāmiyān Valley, and particularly of the Jewish history in the early Islamic world in the valley and outside of it in eastern Iran. So the work on this document has only begun, and we still have more questions than answers. And the first stage of research should focus, at least in my opinion, on deciphering and translating these texts. And the work on Group 1 has already begun, and some of the manuscripts are currently being prepared for publication, but Group 2 is still waiting for its savior. So it is hoped that in the near future, more and more documents from this collection will be studied and published, and we'll be able to develop all these above-mentioned fields of study. Thank you.
I can moderate your questions for you if you like. Congrats your voice a bit.
Okay.
Very good. We have time for questions, so if you just raise your hand kindly, and if you wouldn't mind, if you'd introduce yourself, and if you have an affiliation, maybe give it to us. It'd be helpful. Yes.
Sorry, my name is Ofir Haim. I came here because I thought you were going to show the paintings. Weren't there going to be any paintings?
I wish they were. These documents have no paintings, actually, only texts, mainly documentary material, legal documents and letters, so on.
Behind you. If you want to pass the microphone back, please.
I can speak loudly, I think. Can you explain exactly where they are found? Are they an archive belonging to a family, or are they something that's recently found in a Geniza, or where do they live?
Okay. Some of the material, especially the early one, is probably emanates from the archive of a Jewish family.
In Israel?
That lived in Bāmiyān, in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Now, okay, what? Sorry.
But where are they now?
Where are they now? Most of them are. The documents are presented here are in the National Library of Israel. Now, we don't know if they were found in a Geniza. Because of the Jewish nature, they are called Afghan Geniza because they were found in Afghanistan. But we don't know their exact provenance.
So you don't know how they came to the library?
They came to the library through the antiquities market. Other than that, I have no information though.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Mehri Nicknam, long-standing friend of, it's okay, I can speak up. The one document which is written on parchment, the Hebrew writing is obviously very different. Could you say something perhaps more about it?
Yes. Let me just put it back maybe.
There.
Yes,
Yeah, here we are.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the writing seems also very early, and the other interesting thing is that it is written in a different dialect of Judeo-Persian. When you say early Judeo-Persian, it is not written, it is not a single unified language, it's a group of dialects, as was established by Professor Zhou. So this dialect is not the same one as those that, as the Judeo-Persian that we have in the letters, for example. This one seems to be more either archaic or southwestern.
That's why I asked.
Yes, yes. So it's a peculiar item, right, and we have to study it more thoroughly.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Do you want to go here and then to the back? Yeah.
What?
You go first.
I just have 2 points to mention. One, you mentioned that these names shows the Islamization of the area, which I don't think that's correct, because we saw many names like the one you mentioned, Abu Nasir ibn Hassan, and then it has some Jewish surname.
Yeah.
So the first part is Islamic name.
Yeah.
So you can't say that this is Islamic person or Jewish person. You know, it's a bit difficult. And the second one that you said that we shed a light on intellectual activity, which I can correct it to commercial activity, because it didn't mention that much about intellectual activity, unless we categorize the commercial activity into an intellectual, you know, activity. And then the last one is that I don't know, because maybe I came a bit late, but I don't know what is the purpose of your research. Do you want to know about the Jewish life in Afghanistan, or are you interested in Jewish life in all around the world? Because in this way, in the second way, you have a long way to go. So I don't know, because because if you want to, Jewish people of every community, they are parts of that community, so they may have some aspects of Jewish life, but the background is belong to that community. So you have to learn about the community and then learn about the Jewish life. I can't say that Islamic people of, I don't know, Africa. So if Islamic people of Africa, they have a African culture is totally different from Islamic people of, I don't know, Saudi, or Islamic people living in Indonesia.
Let's let him answer.
So
yeah,
it's
the question's pretty clear.
No, I'm saying what you are investigating, it's not very clear to me.
Okay, so I can explain.
Yeah.
First of all, about the Islamization process.
Yeah.
I was not saying, I was just talking about the fact that the ledger contains many names, and it might be possible to learn something about the Islamization process. I didn't say that the fact that Abu Nasr is called, he has the kunya Abu Nasr, means that the entire area was already Islamized. That's not what I meant, first of all. Second of all, what I did here...
So you can't say for sure.
No,
He's
but
not saying for sure.
I wasn't saying for sure.
Yeah.
I'm saying with a lot of reservation, but of course the ledgers, the fact that, of course we can't establish the entire study of Islamization on practices of name giving. I agree. But of course you still can say something about it.
Yeah, but I heard, I don't know if it's correct or not, but I heard that when Arabs invade this territory, they to somehow force people to change their name. So either if they were, I don't know, Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrian, or whatsoever, they changed their name to make it understandable to Arab invader. So in this case, it can't say that they have changed their religion.
Okay.
We'll go to Pre in a second. If I can just say, I'm a historian in the same period, so this is why I was so excited by these sources. And I've written a book about Islamization in the period. And what we really don't have and what we lack is documentary sources. And that's why this material is so rare. So we can look at the literary sources and we can sort of see patterns and trends and changes. But it's very, 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 very rare to find anything on the ground, you know, that speaks to an actual person. And, you know, having touched these things, I mean, the physicality of them is very remarkable also. I mean, this is not fine paper. This is like a receipt for 2 sheep in one case as we're reading. It's hilarious. And intellectual content, I mean, some of these folios have...
I didn't show much of the intellectual content because they're very fragmentary and few, especially when comparing it to the documentary material. When I talked about intellectual and activity, I wasn't referring to this, but rather to this, and to these fragments. Okay.
Yeah. And the Arabic ones have references to Tabari and Mas'udi, for example, and passing, which is very rare. I mean, any sort of literary, written, textual, manuscript evidence is quite rare anyway for this period.
So it has something, but you didn't have time to mention it.
Of course.
Oh, yeah, no, it's an introduction.
Yeah.
Can we go to you in the back, please? Yes.
Thank you very much, Karim Jama from these two smart studies. Your document regarding the Hussein ibn Ali al-Harbi was very interesting. I wanted to know if that's the only page that you have about this, or about this text, because he was a very prominent Ismaili Da'i and a governor of that region that we know a little, actually, quite, almost just a name. So I'm very interested to know more about the text and the information that it can provide for our research. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have 2 bifolios. That is 8 pages of this work, and I haven't really studied it because I was just involved in cataloging it. But it contains certain events that are related to his period. For example, you have one of the events that are described there is that the speech that Jayhani gave to the servants and to the court after the Amir passed away and his son was about to become ruler. So we incited them to support the son and fight his uncle. I forgot the name, I'm sorry, of the Samanid, Ishaq, I think that's the name of the uncle. So such events that are related to Samanid history, and from these events we could study more about this dynasty and about this commander in particular.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to go here? Thanks, Val.
Do you know if there are any Chinese or Buddhist textual references to these Jewish communities, or even Mongol afterwards?
Okay. Let's say pre-Islamic reports of these communities in Buddhist or Chinese texts? Not that I know of, no. The journals of the monks that traveled there do not mention any Jews. And after the Mongols, or during the Mongols, we somehow noticed that these communities, not only these communities, but entire areas were completely changed, and some cities were destroyed. So we don't really know what happened with these Jews. Some of them possibly migrated to the west. Western Iran during the Mongol period quite flourished, and some of these Jews probably migrated there. But other than that, we don't have much information.
Thank you, Ofir, very much. I mean, when I heard about your lecture, I was really very much excited about this, because my research is also about the Hazaras in Afghanistan, and in Bāmiyān it was quite exciting for me. But anyhow, we don't know much about the ethnic background of these people yet. But what is very striking is these scribes, or whoever wrote at that time, were quite bilingual, at least, so in Hebrew as well as in Persian. And some of these, these words don't have the dots and diacritical marks, and sometimes makes it quite difficult to read. But also, sometimes when they were writing on the back of a Persian paper, I think these are quite small, like this type of papers, isn't it? They are not huge big papers.
Some of them are very, very small notes, especially this. These notes are very, very small, even smaller than what you're holding.
So for me, it's interesting at one point if you, your group can find out about the Jewish education in that area, because they managed to teach, the Hebrew language. It's quite fascinating. I think I would be interested to know about that as well, how that was transmitted and kept.
Yes. Well, the Jewish community or communities had ties with other communities, possibly in the West, and somehow. I mean, the Jewish academies in Babylonia, for example, received taxes from the area of Khorasan. You know that from historical sources, and they probably sent these Jewish academies or yeshivot in Hebrew, probably sent delegates to these communities, and from these delegates they could have studied the Jewish religion and how to read Hebrew and how to write or even use the script. But perhaps we see even a longer tradition of Jewish communities. We don't know much about their provenance. It would be.
I mean, in Kabul there is still one synagogue, and I think one or two people are still living there. So might be they have some manuscripts, like.
Perhaps, but these are the Afghani Jews in the modern period do not. There is no continuation between these communities and the modern Jewish community.
Just a note on the side, quite different, but I remember my grandmother writing letters to her cousins and so on, and receiving letters, Judeo-Persian text, exactly like that.
Yeah.
So, that was the language they not only communicated verbally, but also textually. That was the language. So, and this was not so long ago. This was what, 50 years ago, something like that. So.
Yes. They used the Hebrew script to write Persian for centuries.
Centuries, exactly.
I wish we had the same amount of text from this period as like the one we have.
Even though they were females, they were educated enough in that particular capability to be able to write. I mean, it was not just men, but women. So.
There's a hand here. Yes.
Sorry. Thanks for your talk. It was very interesting, and I came here in a personal capacity, so I don't have necessary association with any organization, but I was curious to learn. So thank you very much for the talk. So two-part question. One question is the group one, the documents you talked about. One of the category was legal document. These legal documents were bilateral legal documents or between the two groups. And the other thing is, because you said that the interesting thing about these documents is you can learn about Islamic legality or legal framework, if you like, then the documents only contain bilateral two people, or they will mention other names, like one of the things in the context of the witness. And there's a lot of emphasis on Islamic framework to have witness on that. So that would be interesting to know, and if you come across that. And the second group, which you talked about, and I appreciate that you said that you're still going through these documents. Have you noticed a transformation or changes of the legal structure or documentation between the group one versus group two? And if yes, what were the influence, if you're able to provide?
Okay. I'll try to answer this.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a very good question. I can't say much about the documents of group two. This one, for example, is an acknowledgement from group two. So, first of all, yes, they are bilateral. They are between two people, and the rest of the people mentioned there are witnesses, as you said. Here they are. You can see the witness clauses are written in Arabic. So, first of all, this is probably, as far as I know, this is the earliest extant Islamic legal document written in New Persian. So that is interesting in itself, and they're much shorter than the later ones, and it would be interesting to see if they're more dependent on Arabic structure and syntax than the ones that are much later. So this is a question that I still should check, but this is the direction I think that we should be going to. And yes, you can see even by the format. I mean, the number of lines here is very short in comparison to other legal documents written in later periods. So yeah, we can see some development, but still, no one has really touched this issue so far.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to see the transformation of the legal structure. If one of the aspects of this research could be that how it has changed or correlated within the time frame and the region as well. So,
for example, the witness clauses in later periods, just an example, the witness clauses in the documents from 12th and 13th century are sometimes written in Persian rather than Arabic. This is one example of a change that might indicate something, like detachment from the Arabic.
Okay, so let's do this question, if you would like to ask, and then we'll go to the online questions.
Do you discern from this document there is economic geography, whether I saw barley and all that trading activity? Do you get any ideas from this manuscript? What sort of composition of the population? What actually the farming or something like that? Trading activity between different groups of people. Anything? It's too early. I assume that you still have to do some research on that. But from this, can you give an idea? You see, is possible?
Well, my impression is that these documents attest to large activity with the rural area of Bāmiyān or other urban centers, and less with long distance trade or with trade going on between various cities. So it's very local. That's what my impression. And I hope that the ledgers that are currently being studied might shed more light on this issue.
Thank you.
Can I just comment? I mean, so I sat with Ofir and we read some of these documents, and they're really hard to read, as you can see, I think. And we sat there at one instance for a good half an hour, with this little receipt. And at the end of it, I looked at him like, it's a receipt for 2 sheep. So it's, I mean, some of this stuff is just like ephemeral, really. I mean, but somehow, luckily, has passed through to us. I mean, it's really exciting, and that you can read it is really, frankly, astonishing.
Sorry, are they available for study as well, for online or any other way? Are the documents available for study?
Yes, they're online. Yes, you can enter the catalog and watch them and study them, of course.
Is everything online now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything is online.
Should we go online, maybe? Yeah.
Okay, 2 questions with apologies for my pronunciation. You mentioned Khawaja. Can you please repeat what it means in Hebrew?
Khawaja is a title in Persian called master, and it could be translated in Hebrew as Adon. It's a Persian word, Khawaja.
Okay. Second question, are there any Jews now in Afghanistan?
There was a film about the last Jew in Afghanistan a few years ago. I think he passed away, so the answer is no, as far as I know.
Well, I'm sure there are some under this guy stuck here.
Any other questions from members of the audience? No? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. So let's just thank Ofir very much. It's just happening. It's very lucky. It's a very
I mean,